Alright, welcome back. This video is a continuing series of discussion of natural law in the Chronicles of Narnia. And a few years ago I wrote a paper on natural law in Narnia. It appeared in a book called Philosophy in the Chronicles of Narnia, edited by Gregory Bossum and Jerry Walls. I think it came out in 2005, so it's been a while, a couple decades, but like most really good literature, great literature, and great philosophy, the ideas are perennial. They never go away. And I think the notion of natural law is even as ill understood and ill applied it is in contemporary American life, Western life, I guess you could say, world, global life. It still needs a hearing. And one of the great ways to hear it or see it is through literature, and one example of that is in Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. Now, I'm not a Lewis scholar or a Lewis expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm a Lewisian fan and fan of Chronicles, and have done some thinking about the Abolition of Man. I published a book 5 years ago now, maybe 6, I can't remember. The book is called Contemporary Perspectives on C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man, and it's published by Bloomsbury Press, secular press, and it's got some really good chapters in it by a variety of scholars that deal with the Abolition of Man. So that's something I have done a lot of thinking of. When this call for papers came out for this book, Philosophy in the Chronicles of Narnia, I thought, I should really try something connecting Lewis's view of natural law in the abolition and connect it with the Chronicles of Narnia. So throughout this video series, I've walked through some ideas about it. What is natural law in the Chronicles? What is natural law in general? How does it connect to the Abolition of Man? How does it show up in the Chronicles in various characters? What are the 3 responses to the natural law or the doctrine of objective value that Lewis indicates in the Abolition? So I've got separate videos on those. In this video, maybe 1 or 2 of these videos, I'm going to talk about the appendix to the Abolition of Man. So Lewis, the Abolition of Man has 3 chapters, and in the it's got an appendix in it. And in the appendix, Lewis gives illustrations of natural law. He's very clear that this is not a proof of natural law; it's an illustration. But I take it to be a really nice way of indicating how natural law is not a European thing, it's not an English thing, it's not a British thing, it's not an American thing, it's not a Christian thing. It's a universal thing. It's a recognition that there is a moral reality that impinges upon us and that we ought to obey and that we can understand rationally, regardless of who we are. Okay, so that appendix and those general laws of natural law, specific cases of it, show up nicely throughout the Chronicles of Narnia. So I want to illustrate some of those and talk about them. And the first one that I want to look at is what Lewis calls the natural law of general beneficence. General beneficence. So that means something like do good. There's a general natural moral law that you should do what's good. I mean, even Aquinas says the main feature of natural law is to do good and avoid evil. That's maybe even more general than the principle of general beneficence. But here's an illustration that Lewis gives in the Abolition. This is a Babylonian example from a text called the Hymn to Samas, or Samas. I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly. My Babylonian's a little rusty these days. But if you know, you can put it in the comments. And here's what he says there. He says, the Hymn to Samas says, rather in those quotes in the Abolition, quote, who meditates oppression, his dwelling is overturned. Who meditates oppression, his dwelling is overturned. So this illustration of the natural law, among others, shows up quite a bit in the Chronicles of Narnia. For example, Mr. Tumnus, the first Narnian we meet in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, sees that there's a law of general beneficence. He meets Lucy, a stranger, who's cold and alone, and brings her to his home, a place of safety and warmth. Mr. Tumnus has been ordered to, we find out later that Tumnus has been ordered by the witch, the White Witch, to turn over any daughters of Eve or sons of Adam that they find. And he initially intends to do this, but something happens to Mr. Tumnus. He sees that something is not quite right what he's about to do. Right? He sees that oppressing the innocent is morally wrong, even when it's ordered by his queen, right? Even those in authority. So Tumnus is willing to reject the powers that be when it violates natural law. And here's what he says. He says, I pretended to be your friend and asked you to tea, and all the time I've been meaning to wait till you were asleep and then go and tell her, the White Witch. Okay. It's in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, chapter 2. So Lucy, of course, as you know, asks Mr. Tumnus to let her go. But Mr. Tumnus says that he's got to let her go. Now he sees that he can't hand her over to the White Witch. He knows that what he's about to do is objectively bad. He knows that letting Lucy go is right and obviously good, objectively. So how did he come to know this? Did Lucy give him an argument? Did she sit down and say, let me break down this syllogism for you. Demonstrating with rigorous logic that kidnapping little girls and hanging them over to White Witches is morally bad? No, not at all. He doesn't do that. She doesn't do that. Lewis doesn't do that. Tumnus looked at Lucy. Right? He recognized in her. He saw what it is to be an innocent stranger in need. Right? Now that's if we want to get into an account, and this is something I'm working on in my current philosophical work, is moral perception. And my own view is moral perception comes from a perception and awareness of essential natures that are exemplified that we can know by natural means. And I think that's what's going on here behind the scenes. Lewis doesn't have an account of moral perception that he does anywhere as far as I know. A little bit in the Abolition of Man, but it's not thoroughly worked out there. I take Aquinas' view and Robert Audi's current views to connect to this. But he saw what it is to be an innocent stranger in need. He understood that kidnapping and deceiving one's neighbor is a wicked thing to do. He saw and decided to live by one of the truths of natural law. And again, that truth, as illustrated in this ancient Babylonian notion, is that if you meditate oppression, his dwelling is overturned. In other words, your own self is overturned. So, Mr. Tumnus saw and decided to live by one of the truths of natural law. The unfortunate thing for Tumnus is that there were still consequences. He was complicit in oppression. He had already joined the White Witch, and as a result, his house in Narnia was overturned. The door had been wrenched of its hinges and broken to bits, the crockery lay smashed on the floor, and the picture of the fawn's father had been slashed into shreds with a knife. There are dangerous consequences, sometimes disastrous, for living in opposition to objective moral reality. Sometimes we may pay a heavy price when we turn away from moral compromise in favor of the Tao. However, Mr. Tumnus' decision to obey the Tao was ultimately rewarded in the new Narnia. Right? So that's kind of an interesting illustration of that. Okay, so there's a double-edged thing here. I mean, sometimes obeying the Tao might result in disastrous things. Sometimes I ask my students, like, look, if getting a degree in philosophy, even especially from an institution which is committed to Jesus, if that was a liability for your career, would you do it? Most of them say no. They wouldn't. Right? Those who followed Christ the most intimately were martyred, except, well, St. John, of course, wasn't, but they tried to kill him. Didn't take, but almost all of them were. But it's worth it, right? The rewards are worth it, the eternal rewards, because we're not just merely this worldly temporal beings. We have eternal life, which is far more important, a weight of glory, if you will. Okay, let's look at another illustration. This is what Lewis calls the Tao of special beneficence. So that was general beneficence. Here's special beneficence. So beneficence again means doing good. General beneficence means a general kind of ethos of doing good to all. Special beneficence applies to specific people or cases or situations we find ourselves in. May not apply to everyone, but to those maybe we're close to. Here's an Old Norse example of this from Sigdrifumal. Again, my Old Norse isn't so great, so forgive me if I mispronounce that. But here's the quotation. Again, this is from the appendix of Lewis's Abolition of Man. Lewis says this: "This first I read thee, be blameless to thy kindred, take no vengeance, even though they do thee wrong. So, let me give you an illustration of this in the Abolition. The Cowler means, Cowler menace, I've never known how to pronounce that, but I don't know if there's an official lexicon. The Cowler means, a wise, wealthy, courteous, cruel, and ancient people. This is a quote from Chronicles. Seem to have a different morality in the Chronicles of Narnia. They dress differently, preferring robes to trousers and scimitars to straight-edged swords. Their customs, poetry, and food are different. Even their gods are different. But the tale applies to them, the Tarquinas, as well as to English school children. For example, Erebus, one of the characters from the Calormean people, found this out firsthand, or rather first back. It was on her back that Aslan applied his long claws. Why? Erebus tells us herself. When she first meets Shasta and the horse and his boy, Erebus tells the story of her escape to Narnia and the North. To get away from her forced marriage to an ugly and oppressive old man, she had to drug a servant girl who was working for her evil stepmother. Shasta asked what happened to that servant girl, and was drugged, and Erebus says, quote, doubtless she was beaten for sleeping late, but she was a tool and spy of my stepmother's. I'm very glad they should beat her. That's from the horse and his boy. So Erebus is happy that this servant girl she drugged so she could escape got beaten. So the question is it a good or a good thing to be glad that a member of your own household is beaten? Even if the punishment is deserved, should I be happy about it? Lewis doesn't seem to think so. He thinks that repaying evil for evil is wrong. But how do we know this? How did Erebus come to know it? Well, in this case, Aslan had to point it out to her. After he scratches her back, Aslan says, the scratches, quote, the scratches on your back, tear for tear, throb for throb, blood for blood, were equal to the stripes laid on the back of your stepmother's slave because of the drugged sleep you cast on her. You needed to know what it felt like. End quote. That's from The Horse and His Boy, chapter 14. So now Erebus knows. She knows, she sees it, right? That cruel treatment of her servant was wrong. She understands the pain of an unjust beating. She felt it. Aslan didn't argue with her, didn't take her through a whole semester of Ethics 101. He simply shows her. The showing is something different than proving. Proof is accomplished through reasoned arguments. But Aslan offers no arguments for Erebus to see that what she did is wrong. He simply shows her that it is wrong. There's a kind of what philosophers call moral particularism here. That is, we have moral knowledge, just like we have knowledge in general, from particular cases that we see with our intellects. Roderick Chisholm's famous paper, The Problem of the Criterion, deals directly with this. And I think there's a strong case to be made that moral knowledge follows along this particularistic route to knowledge. There are just some things that we have to know without proof. This doesn't mean that make them irrational. In fact, unless some things are known without proof, nothing can be known by means of proof. Lewis makes this clear in The Abolition of Man. Unless some things can be established without argument, nothing can be established by means of argument. Similarly, unless we can see that it's wrong to take pleasure in the suffering that one has caused another person, I can make no progress in my own moral growth at all. This is one of the lessons of the natural law in Narnia. Okay, so I hope you found this helpful. I think another video will do a couple more of these special cases, taking the illustrations of the natural law and the Abolition of Man and showing how they connect. Chronicles of Narnia. Thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom. You.